Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, agents. Mounty Carl is back, and today's Division Let's Talk is going to be a state of the game of some sorts, because I watched Skillups' video this morning, which I think is great, by the way, because I think a lot of the issues that he covered were true to the fact of the game, but I feel that I have a different perspective on it, and while he's not wrong, I think the issues are far greater and go beyond some of the items he discussed. Now, we may hit on some of the exact same targets, because as a community, the things that are wrong with the game are just so obvious. So without further ado, let's get into number one. Now, these aren't in any kind of order. I'm just hitting them and talking about them as I get into it and kind of what's most important to me, and I think the community itself, and kind of what is wrong with where we're going and where we're at. So let's go ahead and get into the Darkzone. It is no secret that you won't find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy than in the Darkzone. And the Darkzone is where you go to grief people, and if you're a glutton for punishment, you want to be griefed. Maybe daddy didn't give you enough attention, so you want to go hang out in the Darkzone and get punished. Well, that is where you go to do it. Now, I'm going to take a step back and say that the Darkzone isn't the real problem. It's a symptom of a bigger issue, and maybe even multiple issues. The Darkzone just happens to be the vehicle for all of this, and over the last couple of videos, we've been focused on the Darkzone, and since the beginning, we've focused on the Darkzone and not really what it is. So I took a step back and looked at why everyone hates it, and it's not because of the rogues, it's not because the loot sucks, the enemies are OP, and, you know, over and over again. And it's not only people who are going rogue and people who aren't rogue. Those are just symptoms of a very little known fact that the Darkzone would be fine if for one reason and one reason only, and that is everyone had an equal chance. That's right, the Darkzone is a problem, and probably the game's biggest one, but it's not because of anything the Darkzone is or was or what it can be. It's the fact that people don't have a chance. They can't play in it. That's the issue. Now, there are two sides to this, and it's partly why we need change. Gear sets make a huge difference in this game, in the Darkzone. It's actually why you don't have a chance of surviving in the Darkzone 1v1 or 4v1 or whatever it is, and why you don't have a chance against a group in the DZ. Now, we saw it at the very beginning, even very, very, very beginning of when the Darkzone came out, and you would see one guy taking down 4 people. That was the beginning of the problem. That was the major issue right there. Gear sets and people building the meta are just going to stomp over everyone, and you can't do anything about it. There's nothing you can do. You can go get your friends, and your friends will just be stomped down by them. That's the real problem. There isn't anything you can do as a player to combat someone who is running the meta in the Darkzone and is good at it. This is why it needs a Destiny Crucible effect to it. Even everyone on the playing field, and people will return to the game. Everybody needs an even playing field. That's the simple, basic of how it needs to be done. Now, that doesn't resolve the issue of 8-man gank squads, but that's easily rectified if they add in something for, you know, about rogues being an increased threat to NPCs. The enemy of my enemy is really what the patch needs to be. You go rogue, the NPCs ignore everyone but the person who is rogue, because the rogue is the biggest threat, and they will go after the rogue until the rogue is dead. Then they will go back to murdering everything else. It's a few simple changes like that that can affect how the DZ is played, and making it a more common ground of being an equal source of fun for everyone. The Darkzone can be fixed with PVE zones as well, but PvP needs to be equaled and all bonuses removed. It's the only way to make the Darkzone a true PvP area where people who normally wouldn't have a chance do have a chance. So to quickly sum that up, the Darkzone is foobar right now, and it needs to be redesigned from the ground up, and if they hope to, you know, salvage some of the game. The players who enjoy it now are few and far between, because they're the players who are griefing those and have driven away the majority of the player base, because it's the people that know how to do it and who know how to put the gear together and know how to kill people. Those are the people who are doing it, and they're the minority of the player base. And if you remove the people who have a, you know, who don't have a chance, then you're not gonna have any players left. So what you need to do is equal it out. And I know that this is, you know, I'm trying to stay away from making suggestions in this, but it's so hard. It's so hard to do that, and really what it is. So let's go ahead and move on to discussing single player, because a lot of people want this to have single player elements, and it should. Single players should be able to progress And honestly, screw you people who are like, oh, crybaby complaining that they want more single player in a team-based shooter. Yeah, so about that. If it was meant to be a team-based shooter, I would think all of the cutscenes, all of the missions would be based around teamwork and not include any solo missions at all. The fact is, they talk about the agent and not, hey, your whole team of agents is here. Yay, we're saved. We have 50,000 agents on the street saving the day. That misconception is bullshit, and it's a good try to feel like you have some sort of self-righteous indignation about the game. But at the end of the day, the box says 1 to 4 player co-op and not meant for 4 players on the box. You got less than 4 players and you're screwed. Like, there's nothing about that on the box. It's made for single all the way up to 4 players co-op and not anything else. Also, if it was made for 4 players only, the enemies wouldn't scale and missions wouldn't scale, enabling you to complete anything solo. They made portions of the game soloable for a reason. The problem is that they lost their way. They can't even keep the term heroic in perspective. The solo player is alienated, and it's still one of the largest groups of players in the game. If there was a way to max out your gear solo, a large portion of the population would still be playing, and if they changed it, would come back. I guarantee that. If this was a solo game and you could just do the stuff by yourself, when your friends were offline, people would come back. But no. You still had a path to the end game. There were instances you could not run solo, and that was fine because it was in no way stopped you from progression. And that's, it's just, there's a large portion of the population that you're missing out on by removing the solo end game. But, they need, let's take a look at World of Warcraft. Because this game reminds me, the Darkzone at least, reminds me of a lot of World of Warcraft. And there's been a comparison made by Nachai about World of Warcraft. So let's go ahead and use that. And was that made for a solo person? No. Most MMORPGs aren't made for solo people. But you still had a path at the end game. When you got to the end game, you could choose to go on raids or dungeons and whatever. Or you could do solo. And the missions were a lot harder. They took a lot longer. But yes, there were still instances that you could not run solo, and that was fine because it didn't stop you from progressing as a single player. And that's what this game does. It stops you from progressing if you are solo. And that isn't what the game is about. You are halted. As soon as you finish that last mission, General Assembly, there's no way for you to progress solo except for going through the same content over and over again and doing that. And that's it. There's nothing else you can do except for going into the Darkzone. And even then, you still need people with you in order to kill level 35s. It was much easier back in the day when the Darkzone was like 168 or something like that. I can't even remember. It's been so long. They even added in solo activities and then went and made it so you needed a group to do them. 80% of the HVT missions you can solo, but the ones where you progress your character, they made it so you need a group. How stupid of them. That's stupid, especially since you get the worst gear in the game. And okay, it's not the worst gear in the game, but the gear you get it once a week, and that's it. And it's horrible. Like, there's no reason to do it. And they even made it so you can't even matchmake for HVTs. We had to create a spot in the Camp Hudson to do it. We had to make up for Massive's incompetence. And that's really, we get it. You want us to group, but some people just don't want to do it. And this is a type of game where you put in solo elements and then you just take them away at the very end after you've given them a whole game full of solo content. If they want to continue playing because they like the game, give them more solo content. It's not up to Massive, to you, to force the socially awkward to mingle with other socially awkward people. I'm in favor of making it a longer haul to go solo and get max gear, but there should be a path no matter what. In fact, free game design tip, if you add in 20 hours of missions for solo people, they'll play 20 hours to get the max gear score. Solo players sadly died after you finished the last game of the mission. It's just sad that you guys did that to people and you ruined your game by it. A lot of people will never come back, and the truth of the matter is, and being the state of the game, solo players need to be brought back into the game with a natural progression of loot. Give them something. Give them, you made gear for solo people. You have an idea that solo players play this game, or else you wouldn't have made the Nomad set, or you wouldn't have made these gear sets that are geared toward the single player. I mean, Lone Star, it means a lone star. You know, why are you putting in solo gear when they can't even get the gear to solo? All right. So those were the major topics that I wanted to cover, because as I go through and I research more and more to touch on the PvP versus PvE in the Darkzone, and this is my opinion, I'm adding this in because I saw a post on the forum and somebody messaged me about, or on Twitter, about my opinion on a post in the Ubisoft forum, so I wanted to quickly comment. I would love a PvE only DZ. In fact, I saw something on the Xbox One feed about a target showing up in the DZ soon that Massive promoted or something like that. And how cool would that be to need a team of 20 people in the DZ to take out a massive boss? And then it hit me. If they did that, this game just became an actual MMORPG. The one thing they wanted this to be. So going off on a tangent now, I'm just going to really quickly go off on this, and I'll be right back into what I think state of the game stuff is or whatnot. And this is really going to end up turning into like a game design video or something like that. But let me help you envision a PvE only Darkzone. Imagine, what you will, massive boss battles for the high-end gear that now places solo players back in the game, because going into the DZ to fight level 40 bosses would require 20 people in a giant orchestrated event. Solo players could hop into the DZ and fight alongside players and people to help take out a greater threat. When you extract loot, you now, instead of a timer, have to clear the threat around the landing zone, which could result in a horde-style gameplay mode where you and everyone else who's in the area has to take out waves of enemies and a boss that, you know, comes at you and drops more loot to extract at the end. The potential in a PvE Darkzone would essentially reinvigorate the game. Imagine timed events while you're in your own instance in Manhattan running around that flash on the screen that says, "Agent, the wall of the Darkzone has been breached by unknown enemy. Get in there and neutralize the threat before it can escape into Manhattan." Or, "Agent, there is a credible threat in the Darkzone. Colonel Bliss's second in command is said to be hiding in a building. We need to take him out." And make it so there's these siege events that you have to go through in the Darkzone, and they're timed like the supply drops and stuff, where they just kind of spawn in there, and it doesn't take 1, it doesn't take 4, it doesn't take 8. It takes a massive amount of people to go through and actually kill these, and the loot's good. Like, as long as you get a hit on the boss, you're good. That's what you need. Everybody needs to work together as a team to get in there and go into these buildings and extract them. The sheer amount of fun people would have with this, and it reminded me of the days of questing in the World of Warcraft, where a dragon would appear and you'd see 150 people just hanging out and everyone joining together to kill something. Hell, open up rogue territory in Central Park, you know, and make it designated the rogue zone. Any agents going in there are cut off, and we have no clue what is going on inside, Agent. If you go in there, Agent, there was no telling what you'll find. It's rumored Aaron Keener himself could be in there amassing an army for all we know. Going into Central Park is like the rogue zone. That would be awesome. People would be, you know, just think about this, hiding behind trees, going in, never knowing who's around the corner, getting ganked, and to have loot everywhere. Just, you know, exclusive loot for that zone. It's like a PvP arena, and you have exclusive loot that you can only get in there. It would keep those people, and it's not like it's overpowered loot or anything like that. It's just cooler loot that specializes for PvP arena action. That would be so cool, and yet this is, you know, me talking to you about it and Massive not listening, or, you know, they had their chance to put all this cool stuff in and nobody's thinking about it. It's things like this that aren't hard to do, and I know I was doing a state of the game type thing in response to Skillup, but now I'm excited to see my ideas envisioned in the Division. Now, not only would they happen, but it could be cool to see that happen. Use Central Park as a rogue arena where people can go free for all PvP. Hell, that would make these little fight clubs that pop up in the DZ already, you know, seem viable. Why not give them their own little area, their own arena? You can even give them exclusive rewards, and I already talked about that, but give them exclusive gear and weapons that you can't get anywhere that are on par with the other loot from the rest of the game. These are all simple mechanics, and if the loot is cool enough, and you know, it could be like something cool like a helmet or a chest piece or something that's cool enough to go into these things and promote going in there in a PvP setting and just having a good time. But yet you want to force people to go into a non-fun part of the game that people don't like, that the only thing that's likable about it is that people run around in gank squads killing people. So, all right. enough of that. Let's finish up with this with some discussion. It's going to end up being a two-parter probably, so I'm going to have to end up making another one. Let's just talk about some of these things quickly. Loot drops are just terrible, like terribly bad, and it needs to be fixed through adjusting and consolidating. Take away exotic damage, take fire resistance, take disrupt, and just put them in a single category. I honestly don't understand the redundancies in everything. This goes towards consistency. Heroic missions should give you an expectation no matter what you're doing that it will give you the same experience. This is the same with gear. If you have fire resistance, it should protect you from fire damage and not just being set on fire. It makes no sense. I have no idea why, if you have 100% fire resistance, you still take damage from fire even though it just doesn't set you on fire. It's weird that they decided to completely fail at making gear that no one wants. How can you make gear that's garbage? Like, it doesn't make any I have no idea. Here's a few things you need to remove from the gear, like to make it better, and add bonuses and stuff, but you need to remove this. Remove the armor bonus. Make armor just on there. Don't make it a bonus to a gear set piece. Remove specific weapon bonuses. Remove abilities. Remove resistances. Remove scavenging. Remove XP gains. Remove credit gains. It's all things no one at the end game needs, yet we still see them on gear. We need to cut down on the number of combinations and make users actually think about the numbers when they get gear instead of trying to compromise on what they need to change. Right now, we know you need armor, we know you need weapon damage, we know you need bonuses to critical hit. Why not just make all of those standard on the thing already and just change the numbers? Just make it so that when you get a chest piece, you always have a max number of armor and it's just a certain number. So instead of like having a bonus to armor, make it just 1400 or 1500. Make it so everybody has the same stuff. It's ridiculous. And just make the armor numbers change and fluctuate. Make all the percentages change and fluctuate. That's how other MMOs do it. They give you a set of stats and then they give you a bonus to all the stats. That's how it's done, and that's how this game should be. There's just so much redundant crap in this game that nobody, you get a piece of gear, you have to look carefully at it to see if it's actually something you can use. Let's cut this crap out and make it a number bonus of a stat instead of having 100 different categories. People are displeased that 98% of the loot that drops is terrible. I won't say how high the drop rate is for a chest piece without armor and an electronic stat is, but I have a friend who quit for this one thing. He quit because he couldn't get a chest piece that had useful stats on it. Every single chest piece he got had no armor bonus and had electronics as a stat. So you were forced to go to the recalibration station and fix one of the two, and it was useless. It's ridiculous. Gear is the huge reason people have quit this game, and those that are still here are looking at the easiest way possible to get it, and that means finding a group and farming the 4 horsemen, because that is the path of least resistance right now. And Massive, you have created these avenues for this where people don't give a crap about the rest of your game. They care about farming the loot. That sounds dreadfully boring if you ask me. It's not how Massive, I believe it's not how Massive intended the game to be, but due to woefully underestimating the community, they failed to see that this is one big loot farm game. That's it. The real problem is people are more concerned about the loot than they are playing the game because the loot is so terrible that they need the loot. Each of the activities are a vehicle for getting loot. Some are fun, but the rewards make it so once you do it, it ceases to be fun. They quit because no one wants to play a game that's not fun and it isn't rewarding the player. Alright guys, I'm gonna have to cut that off there. I am in need of doing a part 2 to this video so it doesn't keep going over, 20 minutes of recording. But if you like this and you want a part 2, drop a like on it. Check out Skillups State of the Game. I really liked his take on things and where the community is. He has a very positive vibe about him. I really like that because I am, I do a lot of negative stuff where I talk a lot about how I don't like something, and I really don't go over a lot of the stuff that I do like, but I like The Division. I really like the game. I like a lot of stuff. They do a lot of stuff really well, but I just want to kind of go through this and just talk about this stuff. But he has a really good positive outlook. He's like the yin to my yang, or whatever it is. I don't really know, but go check that out. He has less tangents as well than I do, and he actually discusses things that are more straightforward. Until then, consider subscribing to our channel for the latest latest on The Division and other games, and I got lots of cool content coming soon, and hopefully news on the Survival DLC. For all of us here at The Division, let's talk. I am Mountie Carl, and we'll see you again in the Underground. Agent out.